Okay, today we're going to learn how to create some three-dimensional lighting effects on web buttons. So let's go to workshops and we'll download the buttons assets. When you open them, when you open them, there's a series of examples that you can use to emulate for this project. And the one that we're going to use, I'm going to show you how to use is this one, and then you'll create a second one on your own. So let's open up After Effects, click on the project panel, double click it, and we will import the buttons assets, and go ahead and save that project in that folder. We'll call it buttons. Okay, so we're going to create a new comp, and you're going to make it 500 by 500, one frame long, and we'll call it button 1. And this is the button that we're going to replicate, so we'll drag that into the comp, and I want it to be the size of the comp, so I'm going to hold down the control button and click on the layer, and in transform I'm going to go to fit to comp, and that's going to fill the frame. The next thing we want to do is build a new shape layer. So the first thing we want to do is click down here so we deselect this layer, because otherwise we'll be putting a mask inside it. And so when we're deselected, our mask tool becomes a shape tool. So we will click on the ellipse, and we will set our fill color to be red, and make sure that our stroke is set to 0. And if you're set up a little differently, make sure that this solid is selected. And so with this deselected, we will now double click on the shape tool, and we have a new shape layer. I'm going to drag my my reference on top of it. There we go. Click off the eyeball for a second. And so I'm going to select the shape layer. I'm going to hit circle 1. And the first thing that we want to do is we're going to kind of create this dark edge that's around our circle. And so we will go to Layer, Layer Styles, and we will use Inner Shadow. And we'll scroll down the options. And let's make that inner shadow bigger by dragging out the distance. And then we'll rotate it so it's facing up, straight up. See if 90 is better. Okay. And inner shadow doesn't quite do it for me, so what we'll do instead is we will, with that layer still selected, let's go to Layer, Layer Styles, and let's take a look at Inner Glow. And let's whirl down the Inner Glow options, and first thing we'll want to do is increase the size. Okay. And we want to change the color to black, so I'll just click on that panel right there, choose black. And then we need to change our blend mode to multiply. I'm going to increase its opacity a little bit. Alright. So now we've kind of created that dark edge. I want to see the alpha channel here so I can see the dark edge. So I'm just going to click on this transparency grid and we'll see that. And if we look at our reference, it seems a little sharper than what I have. So we'll go back down. And we'll adjust the range. Sharpen it up a little bit. Now we can make it a little smaller. And now we can reduce the opacity a little bit. Okay, so then let's look at our reference. That looks pretty close. Make it a little darker maybe. So we'll increase our opacity. Okay, that's better. Now you'll see that it's really only on the top half of the circle and not the bottom half. And so what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this circle and we're going to pre-compose it, and we'll let it call it circle 2 comp 1, that's fine. And we're going to pre-compose it so that we can create a mask. And so go up to and create the rectangle tool, and we're going to go halfway down. And we're going to create that mask. I'll turn off the bottom one, and you'll see that we basically have created, we've masked off just so that we have the top half. And then in our bottom circle, we'll turn off the inner glow. And then we will return to our mask, and we'll feather it a little bit to kind of soften the fall off. Okay. So next, we're going to create a new solid, and it doesn't matter what color it is because we are going to apply a gradient ramp to it, and it'll either say ramp or gradient ramp, and we will drag that onto there, and that creates our grid. And what we want to do is we want the, if we look at our, we'll put our button playhouse on it, we want to, you see how then this inner button is kind of lighter red and then darker red? That's sort of what we want to simulate. And so with that white solid, we will pick the light red for that choice, and we'll put the dark red. And we'll call this red gradient. And with that selected, we will select the ellipse tool, and we'll double click it to create a mask. And then scroll down our mask options, and we'll just scrub to the left with our mask until it shrinks down. And we turn off our reference. So we'll scrub it to about approximately minus, let's try minus 22. Okay. And I'd like it to be just a little brighter up here. And so I'm going to just scrub down the vertical until we can see this option here, and then we can pull that down and have control about where the fall off is. So now we've got our reversed grad and our light shadow. So that looks good. Next, in our play button, we want to create a highlight that looks like that. So we will start with another solid. And we can call it white highlight. Doesn't matter what color it is, because we're going to add a ramp to it. And we want to reverse our black and white, so it's white on top and black on the bottom. And I'm going to pull that below our reference. And with that selected, I'm going to double click and create a mask on that. And then you see when I'm hovering, you'll see the little triangle with the square. What that'll do is if I click and drag this little marquee, it'll allow me to have control over just this one node so that I can kind of pull it up like this. And then I'm going to use my mask expansion, and I'm going to shrink the mask a little bit. And then I'm going to feather it so it's softer. And then I'm going to use mode to blend it into our object. And if you don't see mode showing up on your timeline, hold down the control button, go to columns, and make sure mode is selected. And so let's take a look at the four most useful modes. The first is multiply. And what multiply does is that it accentuates the darks and minimizes the lights. And let's go ahead and let's drag our lights down a little bit so that you can see that. Another is add. And add is a really useful one if you want your object to look like it's illuminating light. It's a light source. That's not what we want. Let's take a look at screen. Screen is a little more subtle use of, it keeps the whites and starts creating invisible, and the opacity decreases as it starts to get darker. And I'm going to scrub up with our darkness so we can see that effect. And then there's overlay. And that reverses it. It's going to accentuate the highlights and more than the blacks. So let's take a look at our reference and see what it's doing. And so we've got sort of our white highlights in it, and then it falls off into the dark. And so let's go to screen again, see if that one was right. So that's pretty close. I'm going to hit the letter T to get to opacity, and I'm going to decrease the opacity a little bit. And then I'm going to hit the hotkey for S to scale, and I'm going to unlock it, and I'm going to shrink it a little bit independently. Let's take a look at our reference, and then I'm going to just position it up a little bit. Now you may run into a problem when you're messing with the mask. With this selected, I'll hit M, and then it'll open up the mask tools. Sometimes you'll find that if you grow a mask, that it'll start showing your edges of your solid, and that's because it's a limited size. And so if you run into this problem, you just kind of reduce your expansion until it's not an issue. And if you decide that you want to then make the whole object larger, you can then just use scale to make it bigger, and it won't bleed off the mask. So let's take a look at our reference. I'm going to mess with opacity a little bit more. Okay, so that's kind of a nice three-dimensional effect that is fairly close. I'm going to just pick my mask again, mask path, go to the marquee tool, and we'll just drag, make it just a little more circular, like it is in our reference image, and we'll call that good enough. Okay, so then lastly, we're going to create our playhead triangle, and we'll do that by using a shape. So make sure you don't have anything clicked, and we'll go to our shape tools, and we'll pick the star tool, and we'll double click the star tool. All right, and I'm going to call it triangle, and we'll turn it into a triangle in a second. We'll drag it below our reference, blink our reference off for a second. And in contents, we're going to twirl down polystar path, and you'll see that it's a 5-pointed star. And if we turn it into a 3-pointed star, we've created a triangle. And I want to make this a little smaller. So there's a transform in there so that we can scale it, and we can rotate it so it's the direction that we want it to go. Yep. And so right now on mine, it's got no stroke and a fill, and what we want is no fill. So we would click this to change the color of the fill, but we'll click on fill itself and say no fill, okay, and then we'll click on stroke, and we'll make it white, and then we will increase the stroke size right there. And if we look at our reference, it's a rounded triangle. So what we'll do is we will twirl down stroke, and we want a rounded cap and a rounded join, and that will soften it. And then we'll go back to scale, and we'll shrink it down again. See how close that is to our reference. Pretty close. And then let's look at the reference again. And it looks like we got a little bit of a glow coming off of our triangle. So on our triangle, we'll add one more layer style, outer glow. And we'll twirl down the outer glow, and we'll want to make it pure white. And let's see, how big do we want it to glow? That looks pretty good. And then I'm going to lower the opacity of the glow. And then if we just want to, that'll give us a sense of it. Okay, so now because all of these, except for this reference file, right? Everything we've created is within After Effects. So what I want you to do is then pick one more button. Let's actually get these comps outside of our of our references. But pick another button like the Facebook button, or something simple like this the power button, and recreate that in a separate comp, and then just save the After Effects file and post that on D2L.